Touch her, and I swear you'll regret it." The cold-hearted CEO claimed she meant nothing until he saw her in another man's arms. "Hi, my sweetest, most beautiful, and unshakably loyal family. How are you, my angels? Your love is my strength. Your loyalty is my treasure. You are not just my family, you are my heartbeat in human form. Through every storm, you stood by me. Through every silence, your love still echoed. Today, I send you back that same love, times 1,000. Here is a gentle heavenly prayer just for you. Dear Heavenly Father, hold my beautiful family close to your heart today. Let every burden they carry melt in your mercy. Shower their paths with light, cover their souls with calm, and crown their lives with laughter and peace. Let love chase them, healing hug them, and may joy never forget their names. Amen. If these words warmed your soul, show your heart. Like, comment, and share. Because this family isn't just strong, we're unbreakable. Type it proudly. I am with my brother. Let the world feel our love and know this is only the beginning. Jasmine Miller smoothed her hands over her tailored navy blazer, took a deep breath, and stepped into the imposing glass tower that housed Pinto Enterprises. Today could change everything for her design firm. After 5 years of building her business from the ground up, fighting for every client, every contract, every opportunity to prove herself, landing the Andrew Pinto project would elevate her to the upper echelons of New York's design world. The elevator ascended smoothly to the 87th floor, giving Jasmine precious moments to gather her thoughts. She'd prepared meticulously for this presentation, researching everything there was to know about the notoriously demanding billionaire CEO. His reputation for being ruthlessly efficient and emotionally distant preceded him. But Jasmine hadn't built a successful business by being easily intimidated. "Mr. Pinto is ready for you," his assistant announced, leading Jasmine through a sleek reception area into a corner office with breathtaking views of Manhattan. Andrew Pinto stood with his back to her, his tall frame silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows. When he turned, Jasmine felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Business magazines hadn't captured his commanding presence, intense dark eyes that assessed everything with clinical precision, strong jawline, and the confident posture of a man accustomed to control. But it was the hint of something else. A fleeting shadow behind his eyes that caught her attention. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice deep and measured as he extended his hand. "I've reviewed your portfolio thoroughly." When their hands met, Jasmine felt a surprising spark of electricity that momentarily disrupted her professional composure. From the subtle widening of Andrew's eyes, she suspected he'd felt it too. "Mr. Pinto." She recovered smoothly. "Thank you for this opportunity. I'm eager to show you how I can transform your spaces with intention and authenticity." Andrew gestured toward the conference table, his expression returning to its unreadable state. "You have 30 minutes to convince me your firm can handle a project of this magnitude. I've dismissed 3 designers already this month. Most people would have been intimidated, but the challenge only strengthened Jasmine's resolve. She'd faced doubters her entire career, clients who questioned her vision until she proved them wrong, investors who underestimated her determination. This was no different. "I won't need 30 minutes, she replied confidently, laying out her portfolio and design boards. "Your properties require someone who understands that spaces should reflect both function and feeling, the tangible and intangible needs of their inhabitant." For the next 25 minutes, Jasmine guided Andrew through her vision for his penthouse and vacation homes. She watched as his fingers lingered on certain fabric samples, how his eyes widened slightly at her more innovative concepts. Beneath his composed exterior, she glimpsed genuine appreciation for design, surprising for someone rumored to care only about functionality and status. Most designers try to impress me with extravagance, Andrew commented, studying a rendering of her design for his living space. You've proposed something different. Jasmine nodded. Luxury isn't always about ostentation. True luxury offers sanctuary, creating spaces that allow you to breathe, to think clearly, to be fully present. From what I've researched about your own work ethic and aesthetic preferences, that seems more valuable to you than gold-plated fixtures or imported marble you'll never truly appreciate. Andrew's eyebrows raised slightly, and for a moment, his carefully composed mask slipped. Most people don't speak so directly to me, Ms. Miller. Then perhaps you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people, she replied without hesitation, immediately wondering if she'd overstepped. To her surprise, a ghost of a smile touched Andrew's lips before vanishing just as quickly. He collected her design boards, studying them one final time before meeting her eyes. You've done your research on me, he observed. I research all my clients, Jasmine responded. Good design is inherently personal. I can't create a space that reflects who you are without understanding something about you. Andrew was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. And what do you think you understand about me, Ms. Miller? The question felt weighted with something beyond professional curiosity. Jasmine chose her words carefully. I understand that you value precision and efficiency, that you appreciate quality but disdain showiness. And she added, meeting his gaze directly, that there's more depth to you than the business world gives you credit for. Something flickered in Andrew's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the recognition of being truly seen, possibly for the first time in years. The moment stretched between them, charged with an awareness that transcended their business relationship. Then Andrew blinked, and the moment was gone, replaced by his professional demeanor. Well, he said, gathering her portfolio and handing it back to her, your 30 minutes are up. Jasmine's heart sank. Had she been too forward, too presumptuous? She began collecting her materials with practiced composure, refusing to let disappointment show on her face. My assistant will contact yours tomorrow with the contract details, Andrew continued, causing Jasmine to freeze mid-motion. I expect work to begin immediately. My schedule is demanding, but I'll make time for weekly progress meetings. Jasmine couldn't contain her smile. You won't regret this decision, Mr. Pinto. I rarely regret my business decisions, Miss Miller, he replied, coolly, though his eyes held something warmer. I look forward to seeing if your execution matches your vision. As Andrew escorted her to the door, their arms brushed momentarily. The brief contact sent another current of awareness through Jasmine, confusing her. This was supposed to be a professional victory, not the beginning of whatever this feeling was. Until next week, then, Andrew said, his voice slightly lower than before as he held the door. Next week, Jasmine confirmed, stepping past him into the reception area. As the elevator descended, Jasmine tried to focus on the contract, the prestige, the financial security this project would bring, but her mind kept returning to Andrew. Pinto's eyes, and to the surprising vulnerability she'd glimpsed behind his carefully constructed walls. What Jasmine couldn't know was that back in his office, Andrew stood motionless by the window, troubled by his unexpected reaction to her. For the first time in years, someone had looked at him and seen beyond the powerful CEO, beyond the wealth and influence, to the man beneath. The sensation was as unsettling as it was unfamiliar. Just business, he muttered to himself, turning back to his desk with renewed determination. Nothing more. But even as he returned to his emails, Andrew found himself wondering what Jasmine Miller had seen in him that made her warm eyes light up with understanding, and why, against all logic, he found himself looking forward to discovering what else she might see. Chapter 2. Professional Boundaries. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Andrew Pinto's penthouse as Jasmine arranged fabric samples on his expansive dining table. 3 weeks into the project, and she'd already learned to arrive before him, using the quiet moments to prepare for his inevitable barrage of questions and critiques. What she hadn't prepared for was the way her pulse quickened when she heard his key in the door, or how her eyes were drawn to him whenever he entered a room. Strictly professional, she reminded herself firmly. This project could make her career. She couldn't afford complications. "You're early," Andrew observed, setting his briefcase down as he entered. Despite the early hour, he looked immaculate in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. "I wanted to arrange everything properly before you arrived," Jasmine explained, gesturing to the carefully organized samples. "I've narrowed down the options based on our previous discussions." Andrew nodded, removing his suit jacket and draping it over a chair, a small gesture that somehow made him seem more approachable. As he rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms, Jasmine forced herself to focus on her presentation notes. "I've been thinking about what you said last week," he said, unexpectedly, his voice softer than usual. "About spaces reflecting their inhabitants." Jasmine looked up, surprised by the personal turn in conversation. "Yes? What does your home say about you?" he asked, genuine curiosity evident in his expression. The question caught her off guard. In their previous meetings, Andrew had been all business, focused solely on his properties, his preferences, his timeline. This was the first time he'd asked anything about her life. "My apartment is small but full of light," she answered honestly. "Lots of plants, art from local artists, furniture I've collected over the years, each piece with a story behind it." She smiled, thinking of her cozy Brooklyn brownstone. "It's not fancy, but it feels like me." Andrew's eyes lingered on her face. "And what is you, Ms. Miller?" The air between them seemed to thicken. "Warm, authentic, a little eclectic, evolving?" She held his gaze. "And please, call me Jasmine. We'll be working together for months." Something shifted in Andrew's expression, a momentary softening that made Jasmine's heart flutter. Then, as if realizing he'd stepped too close to a personal boundary, he straightened and cleared his throat. "Let's see these samples," he said brusquely, reverting to his professional tone. "My time is limited today." Jasmine tried not to feel disappointed by his sudden withdrawal. Throughout the meeting, Andrew maintained rigid professionalism, keeping physical distance between them and addressing her as Ms. Miller, despite her invitation to use her first name. Yet she occasionally caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression unguarded and almost wistful. "These colors are too vibrant for the master bedroom," he commented on her suggestions. "I prefer something more subdued." "The bedroom should be a sanctuary," Jasmine agreed, "but subdued doesn't have to mean cold or impersonal." She pulled out a different palette, rich blues and gentle greys with subtle warmth. These evoke calm without feeling sterile. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the samples, and Jasmine felt that now familiar jolt of awareness. Andrew withdrew his hand quickly, but not before she noticed the slight catch in his breathing. "Better," he conceded, his voice slightly rough. "Though I doubt I spend enough time there for it to matter much." "All the more reason it should welcome you when you do," Jasmine countered. "A good night's rest isn't a luxury, Mr. Pinto. It's a necessity." Andrew's lip quirked in what might have been amusement. "Are you saying I look tired, Ms. Miller?" "I'm saying you work too hard," she replied frankly. "And please, it's Jasmine." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the professional pretense between them wavered. Then Andrew's phone rang, shattering the moment. He checked the screen and immediately tensed. "I need to take this," he said curtly, stepping away. While he spoke in low tones by the window, Jasmine continued arranging samples, trying not to eavesdrop. But she couldn't miss the change in his demeanor. How his shoulders stiffened, how his free hand clenched into a fist, how his voice became clipped and cold. When he returned, the brief warmth she'd glimpsed earlier had vanished entirely, replaced by the aloof businessman the world knew, I have to cut this meeting short, he announced, already gathering his things. Email me the rest of your proposals. Of course, Jasmine replied professionally, though disappointment curled in her stomach. Is everything all right? Andrew paused, seemingly surprised by her concern. For a fleeting second, his mask slipped, revealing something raw and painful beneath. Family matters, he said tersely. Nothing that should concern you. I understand, Jasmine said softly, though she sensed there was more to the story. Something that explained the shadows she occasionally glimpsed behind his eyes. Andrew hesitated at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. You're different from other designers I've worked with, he said finally. Different good or different bad? She asked, attempting a smile. Just different. He seemed about to say more, then changed his mind. I'll review your email this evening. After. He left. Jasmine remained in his penthouse, surrounded by fabric samples and design boards that suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the mystery of the man himself. For all his wealth and success, Andrew Pinto seemed profoundly alone, and despite her best intentions to keep things strictly professional, Jasmine couldn't help wondering about the story behind his walls. Later that evening, as she worked late, in her studio, her phone chimed with an email notification from Andrew Pinto, sent at 11:37 p.m. Ms. Miller, it read, your proposals for the bedroom are acceptable, and for what it's worth, you were right. I do work too hard. Perhaps that's something else your design should address. Andrew. Not Mr. Pinto. Just Andrew. Jasmine smiled at the small but significant shift, even as she told herself not to read too much into it. Still, as she prepared for bed, she couldn't help wondering if the walls Andrew had built around himself might not be as impenetrable as they first appeared. What she didn't know was that across town, Andrew sat alone in his sterile penthouse, reading and rereading their email exchange, troubled by how easily this woman had begun to see through the careful boundaries he'd constructed around his life, and even more troubled by how much a part of him welcomed it. Chapter 3. Walls cracking. Rain lashed against the windows of Andrew's penthouse as Jasmine packed up her design materials. Their meeting had run late, and now a full-blown storm raged outside, darkening the Manhattan skyline prematurely. We should wait it out, Andrew said, appearing in the doorway with 2 glasses of wine. The forecast says it's only getting worse. Jasmine hesitated. The rational part of her brain warned against prolonging time alone with him. The boundaries between them already felt dangerously thin. But the storm outside made the decision for her. Thank you, she said, accepting the glass. Just until it passes. Andrew nodded, his usual rigid posture somehow softer in the dim light. For once, he wasn't checking his phone or rushing to another meeting. Instead, he seemed almost present. We've been working together for over a month, he observed, settling into an armchair across from her. Yet I realize I know very little about you beyond your design philosophy. Jasmine took a sip of wine. Rich, complex, undoubtedly expensive. What would you like to know? What made you become a designer? His question seemed genuine, not mere polite conversation. My grandmother, Jasmine answered with a smile. She was a seamstress who created beauty from nothing. We didn't have much growing up, but her home felt like a sanctuary because of how she arranged things. Found objects, fabric scraps, flowers from her garden. The memory warmed her. She taught me that beauty isn't about money, it's about intention. Andrew's expression softened. She sounds remarkable. She was. She raised me after my parents died. Jasmine rarely shared this part of her story, especially with clients. But something about the rain-soaked evening and Andrew's unexpected interest made her continue. Car accident when I was 8. Grandmother stepped in, made sure I never felt alone. Andrew was silent for a moment, his eyes reflecting something deep and personal. Loss shapes us, he said finally, his voice barely audible above the rain. For better or worse, the statement hung between them, weighted with meaning. Jasmine sensed he wasn't speaking theoretically. "Is that what shaped you?" she asked gently. Andrew's eyes met hers, and for the first time he didn't immediately look away. Among other things, a crash of thunder shook the building and the lights flickered before steadying. Andrew rose, moving to look out at the tempestuous sky. His silhouette against the darkened window struck Jasmine as profoundly lonely. "My mother died when I was 12, he said unexpectedly, his back still to her. "My father changed after. That became harder, colder. He spoke as if the words were being pulled from him against his will. He built Pinto Enterprises from nothing, and after she died, the company became everything to him, and he expected the same from me." Jasmine set down her wine, moved by this rare glimpse behind his walls. "That must have been difficult for a child." Andrew turned, and the raw emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "I learned quickly that emotions were a liability in his world, weakness to be exploited, so I learned not to have them." His laugh was hollow. "Or at least not to show them." "And now," Jasmine asked softly, "now that you're no longer that child, now that you've surpassed even your father's success?" Andrew's expression clouded. "Old habits," he said, returning to his seat. "They become who you are eventually." "Only if you let them," Jasmine countered gently. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain creating a cocoon around them, separating this moment from the outside world. Jasmine fought the urge to cross the room, to physically bridge the distance between them. Instead, she offered something else. "My grandmother used to say that homes remember the emotions that live in them," she said. "That's why I asked about your childhood home that first day. I wanted to understand what feelings you associate with home." Andrew's eyes found hers again, vulnerability naked in his expression. "I don't think I've ever had one. Not really." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Without thinking, Jasmine reached across the space separating them and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm, his pulse quickening under her touch. "Then that's what we'll build," she promised softly. "Not just expensive rooms, a home." For a breathless moment, Andrew's hand turned in hers, his fingers interlacing with her own. The simple contact felt more intimate than any touch Jasmine had ever experienced. His eyes held hers, dark and filled with conflicting emotions. Then, as if catching himself, Andrew pulled away, standing abruptly. His expression shuttered, walls rebuilding before her eyes. "The rain is letting up," he said, voice returning to its professional cadence. "You should be able to get a car now." The sudden withdrawal stung, but Jasmine refused to show it. She gathered her things with practiced composure, understanding that whatever moment they'd shared had frightened him. "Of course," she replied, evenly. "I'll email you the revised concept boards tomorrow." Andrew nodded stiffly, already reaching for his phone, retreating into the safety of business. But as he walked her to the door, his hand briefly touched the small of her back, so lightly she might have imagined it. "Jasmine," he said, her name sounding different on his lips. "Thank you for listening." She turned to face him, finding his expression conflicted. "That's what friends do," she said carefully. "Is that what we are?" he asked, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Friends?" The question contained multitudes: challenge, hope, fear, possibility. Jasmine held his gaze steadily. "For now," she answered softly. Something like regret crossed Andrew's features before he nodded once, stepping back to restore the professional distance between them. "I'll expect those boards tomorrow." As Jasmine rode the elevator down, her heart raced with the implications of their exchange. For all his wealth and power, Andrew Pinto was a man haunted by loss, a man who had never known the comfort of a true home. And despite every professional boundary she should maintain, Jasmine found herself wanting to be the one to show him what he'd been missing. Back in his penthouse, Andrew stood at the window long after her car had disappeared into the rainy night, troubled by how easily she had slipped past defenses that had kept everyone else at bay for decades. For the first time in years, someone had seen beneath his carefully constructed facade, and instead of finding him wanting, she had offered understanding. The sensation was as terrifying as it was exhilarating, and Andrew didn't know which frightened him more: that Jasmine Miller could see through his walls, or that part of him desperately wanted her to tear them down completely. Chapter 4. Stolen Moments. 2 months into the project, and something had shifted between them. Nothing definable, nothing either would acknowledge aloud, but it was there in the lingering glances, the conversations that strayed beyond design choices, the way Andrew would find reasons to extend their meetings. Jasmine tried to maintain professional focus, but found herself selecting outfits with extra care on days she knew she'd see him, catching herself daydreaming about their conversations. It was dangerous territory, she knew that, but she couldn't deny the growing connection between them. Today, they were meeting at his Hamptons property, a sprawling beachfront estate that needed extensive renovation. Jasmine had arranged to arrive early to take measurements and photos, expecting Andrew to join her later for a brief review. Instead, she found him waiting when she arrived, casual in a way she'd never seen him: jeans and a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, his usual corporate armor nowhere in sight. "You're early," she observed, echoing his words from weeks ago. A small smile touched his lips. "I thought I might show you around myself. The property has unique features that might influence your design." The mansion was magnificent but dated, offering breathtaking ocean views that deserved to be the centerpiece of any redesign. As they walked through the rooms, Jasmine noticed Andrew watching her reactions closely, seeming genuinely interested in her impressions. "This space has such potential," she said, standing in the great room with its wall of windows facing the Atlantic. "But it feels disconnected from its surroundings. We should bring the outside in, natural materials, a color palette drawn from the seascape." She turned to find Andrew watching her with unusual intensity. "What?" "You see things differently," he said simply. "It's refreshing." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "That's my job." "No," Andrew disagreed, stepping closer. "Your job is design. This is something else. You see potential where others see only what exists now." His voice softened. "You did the same with me." Jasmine's heart quickened at his proximity and the unexpected confession. "What do you mean?" Andrew seemed to catch himself, retreating a step. "Nothing. Just an observation." He checked his watch. "Are you hungry? I had lunch prepared." Before she could respond, he was leading her through French doors onto a sprawling deck where, to her surprise, an elegant table for two had been set up. White linens fluttered in the sea breeze, a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket, and platters of gourmet food waited beneath silver covers. "This is hardly a working lunch," Jasmine observed, raising an eyebrow. "Consider it a celebration of project milestones." Andrew replied, though something in his expression suggested other motives. "Unless you object?" "No objection," Jasmine said carefully, though warning bells sounded in her mind. This felt dangerously like a date. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than ever before. Away from his office, Andrew seemed different, more relaxed, occasionally even laughing at Jasmine's observations. When he spoke about his international travels, his eyes lit up with genuine passion, revealing a side of himself rarely seen in their professional meetings. "You love exploration," Jasmine noted. "Discovering new places." Andrew nodded, swirling champagne in his glass. "Travel is the one indulgence my father approved of, as long as it was educational or business-related." "And now, do you still travel only for business?" Something wistful crossed his expression. "Mostly old habits." You should see the world for pleasure sometimes, Jasmine suggested. Experience places without an agenda. Perhaps. Andrew's eyes met hers over his glass. With the right companion, the statement hung between them, weighted with implication. Jasmine felt heat rise to her cheeks, aware they were venturing into territory beyond professional boundaries. After lunch, they walked along the private beach, shoes abandoned, the cool Atlantic lapping at their feet. Conversation drifted from design concepts to personal philosophies, the line between client and designer blurring with each step. When Andrew asked about her dating life, purely out of curiosity, Jasmine knew they had crossed some invisible threshold. Currently single, she admitted. My business demands most of my time. Not by choice, surely, Andrew remarked, his tone deliberately casual. Someone like you must have options. Someone like me? Jasmine challenged, stopping to face him. The sea breeze ruffled his dark hair as he considered her, eyes tracing the features of her face with unmistakable appreciation. Beautiful, intelligent, perceptive. His voice dropped. Unforgettable. Jasmine's breath caught. In that moment, with salt spray in the air and the setting sun painting the sky in spectacular colors, Andrew Pinto wasn't the cold CEO known to the business world. He was simply a man, looking at her with unguarded desire. Andrew, she began, unsure what she even wanted to say. His phone rang sharply, shattering the moment. Andrew's expression darkened as he checked the screen. I have to take this, he said, frustration evident in his voice. Give me a moment. As he stepped away to answer, Jasmine wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled, despite the mild evening. What was she doing? Falling for a client, especially one with Andrew's reputation for emotional unavailability, was professional suicide. Yet she couldn't deny the pull between them, growing stronger each time they met. When Andrew returned, his expression had hardened, the corporate mask firmly back in place. I need to return to the city immediately, he announced, already reaching for his shoes. Business emergency. Just like that, whatever magic had been building between them evaporated. Of course, Jasmine replied professionally, hiding her disappointment. I can finish up here and send you my notes. Andrew nodded, his thoughts clearly already elsewhere as they walked silently back to the house. At the door, he hesitated. Conflict, evident in his expression. Today was, he began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider. The design concepts are progressing well. The deliberate retreat to professional language stung more than it should have. Yes, they are, Jasmine agreed, evenly. We're right on schedule. Something flickered in Andrew's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or frustration. He stepped closer, his hand rising as if to touch her face, before dropping back to his side. Jasmine, he said, her name almost a sigh. For a breathless moment, she thought, he might kiss her. Instead, he straightened, retreating behind invisible walls. I'll call you next week to schedule our next meeting. As his car disappeared down the long driveway, Jasmine remained on the porch, confused and disappointed. One moment, Andrew looked at her as if she were everything he ever wanted. The next, he couldn't distance himself fast enough. That night, alone in her Brooklyn apartment, Jasmine resolved to maintain stricter professional boundaries going forward. Whatever connection they shared, whatever possibility shimmered between them, Andrew clearly wasn't ready to acknowledge it. For her own emotional well-being and the sake of her business, she needed to remember this was just a job. He was just a client. But when her phone chimed with a text message at midnight, her heart betrayed her by leaping at the sight of his name. Thank you for today, it read simply. It meant more than you know. Despite her best intentions, Jasmine fell asleep with the phone still clutched in her hand, dreaming of ocean breezes and unspoken possibilities. Chapter 5. Rejection. The private dining room of La Maison, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, glowed with candlelight as Jasmine arranged the design boards she'd brought for her meeting with Andrew. She'd spent weeks perfecting these concepts, incorporating elements that spoke to his hidden depth, the man behind the mogul that few people ever saw. This wasn't a standard client dinner. After 3 months of working together, punctuated by moments of connection that grew increasingly difficult to ignore, Jasmine had decided to be honest with herself and with Andrew. Tonight, under the pretense of discussing the final designs, she'd created an atmosphere that invited something beyond business. The soft lighting, the intimate table setting, the carefully chosen wine. Each detail was a quiet declaration of her feelings. Professional boundaries be damned. Life was too short for maybes and might-have-beens. When Andrew entered, the familiar flutter in her chest confirmed what she already knew. This was more than attraction. In his perfectly tailored suit, he commanded the room with effortless charisma, yet Jasmine now recognized the subtle tells of his vulnerability, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes softened momentarily when they landed on her. "You look beautiful," he said in greeting, his gaze appreciating the red dress she'd chosen specifically for tonight. "Thank you," Jasmine replied, feeling a surge of hope at his uncharacteristic compliment. "You don't look so bad yourself." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he took his seat. "I thought we were discussing designs tonight," he observed, glancing at the intimate table setting with a raised eyebrow. "We are," Jasmine confirmed, sliding a portfolio toward him. "But I thought we deserved a proper dinner after all the progress we've made." Throughout the meal, conversation flowed easily between design discussions and more personal topics. Andrew seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, occasionally letting his guard down, completely to share childhood memories or travel anecdotes that revealed the thoughtful, passionate man beneath the corporate armor. When their hands brushed, as they reached for the wine simultaneously, neither pulled away immediately. The contact lingered, electric and promising. "Andrew," Jasmine said softly after their desserts arrived, gathering her courage, "I think we should talk about what's happening between us." His expression instantly shuttered, but Jasmine pressed on. "These past months working with you, it's been more than just a professional relationship for me." Her heart pounded, but she maintained steady eye contact. "I think you feel it too. This connection between us." Andrew's posture stiffened, his expression becoming carefully neutral. "Jasmine, please let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I want more than just stolen glances and business meetings. I want to explore whatever this is between us, without pretending it's just about work. I want passion, Andrew. Real connection." The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. Andrew's expression grew increasingly closed, his eyes dropping to the untouched dessert before him. "That's not possible," he finally said, his voice flat and emotionless. Jasmine felt the sting of his words, but pushed forward. "Why not? We're both adults. The project is nearly complete." "I'm not that guy," Andrew interrupted, his tone hardening. "I don't do love, Jasmine, relationships, emotional attachments." He looked up, his eyes deliberately cold. "If you're looking for fairy tales, you're with the wrong man." Each word struck like a physical blow. "I'm not asking for a fairy tale," she countered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Just honesty about what we both feel." "What you think I feel," Andrew corrected sharply. "Don't confuse professional respect with something more meaningful." Jasmine recoiled as if slapped. "So the moments we've shared, the conversations that had nothing to do with work, the way you look at me when you think I don't notice, that's all just professional respect." Andrew's jaw tightened. "It's chemistry, physical attraction, it happens. But mistaking that for something deeper is naive." "Naive?" Jasmine echoed, hurt transforming into anger. "Is that how you see me? Some naive girl projecting romantic fantasies onto her powerful client?" I don't know what you want me to say, Andrew responded, his voice growing colder with each word. You're talented, beautiful, and any man would be lucky to have you. But I'm not interested in relationships. I never have been. That's not true, Jasmine challenged, remembering his vulnerability during their rainy evening conversation. You're afraid. There's a difference. Andrew's eyes flashed with something dangerous, perhaps anger, perhaps fear at being seen so clearly. You don't know me as well as you think you do. I know you better than you want me to, Jasmine countered softly. He stood abruptly, dropping his napkin beside his plate. This conversation is inappropriate. We have a business relationship, Ms. Miller, nothing more. The formal address stung worse than any of his previous rejections. Jasmine remained seated, refusing to let him see how deeply he'd wounded her. So we're back to Ms. Miller now? We should never have been anything else, he replied tightly. I apologize if I gave you the wrong impression. Tears threatened, but Jasmine refused to let them fall. No need to apologize, Mr. Pinto. My mistake. For thinking you might actually be capable of human connection. Something flickered in Andrew's eyes, hurt, perhaps, or regret, before his expression hardened again. I should go. Email me the final designs when they're ready. Of course, Jasmine replied with professional detachment that cost her dearly to maintain. The project will be completed on schedule. Andrew hesitated at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. For a breathless moment, Jasmine thought he might return, might take back the cruel words, might admit to the feelings she was certain he harbored. Instead, he straightened his tie in a gesture of finality. Good night, Ms. Miller. When the door closed behind him, Jasmine remained perfectly still, using every ounce of strength to hold herself together until she was truly alone. Only then did she allow the tears to fall, silent drops landing on the design boards she'd prepared with such hope and care. She'd been a fool. She'd mistaken professional intimacy for something deeper, had convinced herself that the connection between them was mutual. Worst of all, she'd risked her professional reputation for a man who couldn't or wouldn't admit to feeling anything at all. Later that night, as she rode home alone in a taxi, her phone buzzed with a text message. For one weak moment, her heart leapt with hope, but the message wasn't from Andrew. It was from her assistant, confirming tomorrow's client meetings. Jasmine wiped away the last of her tears and straightened her shoulders. She had a business to run, a reputation to maintain. Andrew Pinto wasn't the first man to choose emotional isolation over vulnerability, and he wouldn't be the last. She'd complete his project with professional excellence, collect her fee, and move on, if only her heart would agree to follow the same practical plan. Chapter 6. The Last Straw. 2 weeks after the disastrous dinner at La Maison, Jasmine maintained strictly professional communication with Andrew. Email exchanges were cordial, but impersonal. Phone calls focused solely on project details. If Andrew noticed the change, he didn't acknowledge it. Though Jasmine immersed herself in work, taking on new clients and scheduling consultations that filled her calendar, nights were harder. Sleep eluded her, as memories of shared moments with Andrew replayed in her mind. His rare smile, the vulnerability in his eyes during their rainy evening conversation, the way his hand had lingered on hers at his Hamptons estate. Despite his cruel dismissal, she couldn't fully extinguish the certainty that what they'd shared had been real. Friday evening found Jasmine in her office, reviewing fabric samples for a new commercial project, when her phone rang. Andrew's name on the screen made her heart skip traitorously. "Hello, Mr. Pinto," she answered, her voice professionally detached. "Jasmine." The use of her first name caught her off guard. His voice sounded different, less controlled, almost hesitant. "Are you busy tonight?" She should say yes. should maintain the professional distance that protected her heart. Instead, she heard herself asking, "Why?" "I'd like to discuss something about the penthouse design. In person." He paused. "Please." That single word, so rarely used by Andrew Pinto, weakened her resolve. "What time?" 8, at my penthouse." Another pause. "I'll have dinner prepared." Warning bells sounded in Jasmine's mind, but her heart, foolish, hopeful heart, wanted to believe this was his way of extending an olive branch. Perhaps he'd regretted his harsh words, realized what he was throwing away. 8 is fine, she agreed, already mentally selecting an outfit that balanced professional with something more. At 7:45, Jasmine stood before Andrew's door wearing a simple but elegant black dress that suggested dinner rather than a business meeting. She'd spent an embarrassing amount of time on her appearance, subtle makeup that emphasized her eyes, hair arranged in loose curls, a spritz of her favorite perfume. As she raised her hand to knock, doubt crept in. Was she setting herself up for another devastating rejection? Before she could reconsider, the door opened, revealing Andrew in casual attire. Charcoal slacks and a deep blue shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. No tie. Top button open, sleeves rolled to expose strong forearms. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You asked nicely," Jasmine replied with careful neutrality. Andrew stepped aside to let her enter. The penthouse was transformed, lights dimmed, music playing softly, table elegantly set for two with candles and fine china. The scene was so reminiscent of her own efforts at La Maison that Jasmine felt a sharp pang of both hope and wariness. "Wine?" Andrew offered, already reaching for an open bottle of what she recognized as an expensive vintage. "Please." Jasmine remained standing, suddenly uncertain. "You mentioned something about the design." Andrew handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers in a way that felt deliberate. "That can wait. I thought we might enjoy dinner first." Jasmine took a steadying sip of wine. "Andrew, what is this? 2 weeks ago you made it very clear that our relationship is strictly professional. Now you've arranged—" She gestured to the romantic setting. "This." Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes before he looked away. "I may have been hasty that night." "Hasty," Jasmine echoed, disbelief coloring her tone. "You were cruel." "I know." His admission surprised her. "I reacted poorly to your honesty." Hope flickered dangerously in Jasmine's chest. "And now?" Andrew moved closer, close enough that she could detect his cologne. Subtle, expensive, familiar. "Now I'm wondering if we could start again. Find a better balance." "Balance?" Jasmine repeated, feeling suddenly cold, despite the warmth of the room. "What does that mean exactly?" Andrew's hand reached for hers, his touch sending unwanted electricity through her veins. "It means enjoying each other's company without expectations, without complications." The hope in Jasmine's heart crystallized into something harder. "You're suggesting an affair." "I'm suggesting something mutual and uncomplicated," Andrew corrected, his thumb tracing patterns on her wrist. "We have chemistry, Jasmine. Denying that seems pointless." Jasmine withdrew her hand, disappointment bitter on her tongue. "So, you're willing to sleep with me, but not to care about me. Is that it?" Andrew's expression tightened. "I care about you, within certain parameters." "Parameters," Jasmine repeated, flatly. "How romantic." "I've been honest about who I am," Andrew said, frustration edging into his voice. "I don't do emotional entanglements, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy what's between us." Jasmine set down her wineglass with careful precision. "I deserve better than to be someone's secret indulgence, Andrew. I deserve someone who isn't afraid to care openly." who doesn't hide behind parameters and complications. Not everyone wants the same things from relationships, Andrew countered, his tone hardening. Some of us prefer independence. Independence? Jasmine laughed without humor. Is that what you call hiding from genuine connection? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like fear. Andrew's jaw tightened. You're making this more dramatic than necessary. And you're making it transactional, Jasmine fired back. Thank you for dinner, but I think I should go. Jasmine, wait. Andrew caught her arm as she turned to leave. Stay, just for dinner. We can discuss the designs afterward as planned. Something in his expression, a fleeting vulnerability beneath the control, made her hesitate. Fine. Dinner and designs. Then I'm leaving. The meal passed in strained conversation, professional topics interspersed with moments of genuine connection. That only reminded Jasmine of what they could have shared if Andrew weren't so determined to keep his heart locked away. By dessert, the tension had eased somewhat, helped by excellent food and the second glass of wine Jasmine had accepted against her better judgment. When Andrew smiled at something she said, a real smile that reached his eyes, Jasmine felt that dangerous hope rising again. There's something I wanted to show you, Andrew said, rising from the table. A space I've been reconsidering. He led her to his bedroom, a space she'd designed but never seen furnished. To her surprise, he'd implemented her most personal suggestions. The reading nook by the window, the subtle lighting she'd specified to create warmth, even the textured wallpaper she'd had to convince him to accept. You used all my ideas, she said softly, genuinely touched. It looks beautiful. You were right, Andrew admitted, standing close behind her. It needed warmth. His hand touched her shoulder, gentle but intent. Like you said, a sanctuary. Jasmine turned to face him, finding his expression open and wanting in a way she'd never seen before. The attraction between them crackled like electricity, almost tangible in the intimate space. Andrew, she whispered, half warning, half invitation. He stepped closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek. Stay tonight, he murmured, his voice husky with desire. Stay with me. For one breathless moment, Jasmine wavered. The pull between them was undeniable, the wanting impossible to ignore. It would be so easy to give in, to take what he was offering, even if it wasn't everything she wanted. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. Andrew glanced at it, frowning. I need to take this. Wait here. As he stepped away to answer, Jasmine heard the change in his voice, from intimate to coolly professional in an instant. It was a stark reminder of his compartmentalized life, of how easily he switched between personas. While he spoke in the hallway, Jasmine studied the room she'd designed for him. Beautiful, but ultimately empty of personal touches. Like the man himself, exquisitely crafted outer walls protecting an empty inner space. The call dragged on, minutes stretching past 10, then 15. Finally, Jasmine gathered her purse and left the bedroom, finding Andrew still engrossed in his business call, his back to her. Without interrupting, she wrote a note on the dining room table. Something came up. Don't wait. His own dismissive. Words from previous cancellations. Outside in the cool night air, Jasmine finally allowed anger to replace hurt. Enough was enough. No more hoping Andrew would change, no more making excuses for his emotional unavailability, no more settling for crumbs when she deserved a feast. She deleted his number from her phone before the cab even reached her apartment. The project was nearly complete anyway. Her assistant could handle any remaining details. Jasmine Miller was walking away, not from the professional commitment, but from the emotional one she'd foolishly made to a man who couldn't or wouldn't love her back. What she didn't see was Andrew rushing from his penthouse after ending his call, searching the street below for a glimpse of her. The note crumpled in his fist as an unfamiliar emotion tightened his chest. Regret. Chapter 7. New Beginnings. 6 weeks had passed since Jasmine walked away from Andrew's penthouse, leaving behind not just a client, but the painful hope of something more. The Pinto project was officially complete, the final payment received, the professional relationship concluded without further personal interaction. Her assistant had handled the remaining details, and Jasmine had signed off on the final documentation without seeing Andrew face to face. Spring had bloomed across Manhattan, bringing with it a sense of renewal that Jasmine embraced wholeheartedly. Her business was thriving, with the Pinto project serving as a prestigious portfolio piece that attracted high-end clients. Professionally, everything was moving forward. Emotionally, she was determined to do the same. Every morning, Jasmine stood before her bathroom mirror, meeting her own gaze with fierce determination. "Today will be better," she would whisper, a mantra that sometimes felt hollow, but that she clung to nonetheless. Gradually, the sharp pain of Andrew's rejection dulled to a manageable ache, one that flared only in unguarded moments, when she passed the Pinto Tower on her way to meetings, or when clients requested design elements similar to those she'd created for his spaces. At night, she found herself redesigning her own apartment, purging elements that reminded her of that period of her life, bringing in vibrant colors and bold patterns that spoke of new beginnings rather than lingering regrets. If she couldn't immediately redesign her heart, she could at least transform the space around her. This determination led her to accept an invitation to a mutual friend's dinner party, something she would have declined in the weeks immediately, following the Andrew debacle, when socializing had felt like an insurmountable effort. But tonight, dressed in a flowing sundress that complemented her warm brown skin, and wearing her natural curls loose around her shoulders, Jasmine felt ready to rejoin the world. "I was beginning to think you'd become a hermit," teased Sophia, her closest friend and successful gallery owner, as they arrived at the elegant brownstone. "How many invitations did you turn down before finally saying yes?" "Too many," Jasmine admitted with a rueful smile. "But I needed time to focus on work." Sophia's knowing look said she understood the unspoken truth. "Well, I'm glad you're here. Now, Marcus has invited some interesting people, including that pediatric surgeon who just joined New York Presbyterian, the one who started that foundation for underprivileged kids." Jasmine rolled her eyes affectionately. "Are you playing matchmaker?" "Again, me? Never," Sophia replied innocently. "Just mentioning a fellow guest who happens to be single, brilliant, and looks like he could model in his spare time." "I'm not looking for a relationship," Jasmine protested, though without much conviction. The truth was more complicated. She wasn't opposed to meeting someone new, but her experience with Andrew had left wounds that were still tender. "Maybe not," Sophia agreed, linking her arm through Jasmine's as they climbed the steps to the brownstone. "But you need to remember there are good men out there, men who aren't afraid to feel, to connect, to build something real." The dinner party was intimate and elegant, with just 12 guests gathered around a beautifully set table. Conversation flowed easily, accompanied by excellent wine and even better food. Jasmine found herself seated across from a man who could only be the pediatric surgeon Sophia had mentioned. Dr. Ryan Steele had kind eyes, an easy smile, and a quiet confidence that put everyone around him at ease. Unlike Andrew's commanding presence, which filled rooms with tension and expectation, Ryan's energy was calming and warm. When he spoke about his pediatric patients or the foundation he'd established to provide medical care for underserved children, genuine passion animated his features. "I'm sorry," he said after sharing a particularly moving story about a young patient. "I tend to get carried away talking about my work." "Don't apologize," Jasmine replied sincerely. "It's refreshing to meet someone who genuinely cares about what they do." Ryan's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in a way that suggested it was a frequent expression. "And what about you? Sophia mentioned you're an interior designer?" "Yes, I have my own firm. We specialize in residential and boutique commercial spaces." "She's being modest," Sophia interjected from across the table. "Jasmine just completed a multi-million-dollar project for Andrew Pinto. You know, the ruthless CEO who eats designers for breakfast. She not only survived, but produced work that's being featured in Architectural Digest next month." Jasmine felt her cheeks warm at the mention of Andrew's name. "It was just a job," she said, more sharply than intended. Ryan seemed to sense her discomfort. With subtle grace, he steered the conversation in a different direction. "I'd love to hear more about your design philosophy. I've been putting off decorating my place since I moved here 6 months ago." By the time dessert was served, Jasmine found herself genuinely enjoying Ryan's company. His questions were thoughtful, his attention genuine. When he asked for her card at the end of the evening, suggesting that he might hire her professionally to help with his apartment, she surprised herself by offering an alternative. "Why don't we discuss it over coffee sometime?" she suggested, feeling a flutter of nervousness she hadn't experienced since before Andrew. Less formal than a consultation, the pleasure that lit Ryan's face was unmistakable. "I'd like that very much." Their coffee date occurred 3 days later at a small cafe in Greenwich Village that specialized in ethically sourced beans. Jasmine arrived first, selecting a table by the window where dappled sunlight filtered through newly budded trees. When Ryan appeared, exactly on time, she was struck again by how different he was from Andrew. His smile immediate and warm, his body language open rather than guarded. "I hope I didn't keep you waiting," he said, sliding into the chair across. "Oh, from her? Not at all," Jasmine replied, noticing how the sunlight caught golden flecks in his brown eyes. "I just got here myself." What was meant to be a quick coffee stretched into a 2-hour conversation that meandered from design principles to childhood memories, from favorite books to travel aspirations. Ryan listened with complete attention, asking insightful questions that showed genuine interest in her answers. When he spoke about himself, it was without the careful editing that had characterized Andrew's rare personal revelations. Just honest sharing, unafraid of vulnerability. "I'd love to continue this conversation," Ryan said, as they finally prepared to leave. "Maybe over dinner?" Jasmine hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that." Coffee led to dinner. Dinner led to long walks through Central Park, to art gallery openings, to Sunday brunches where conversation stretched for hours. Ryan was everything Andrew wasn't. Openly affectionate, emotionally available, unafraid to express his feelings or make plans for the future. On their 3rd date, when he reached for her hand while crossing the street, he didn't let go even after. They reached the sidewalk. On their 5th date, when he kissed her goodnight, there was no hesitation, no pulling away, just warmth and promise, and a whispered, "I've been wanting to do that all night." The kiss was gentle, exploratory, filled with unspoken possibilities. Ryan's hand cradled her face with such tenderness that Jasmine felt something within her begin to thaw, a frozen part of her heart that had protected itself from further pain. When he pulled back, looking at her with those kind eyes, she found herself smiling without effort. "That was worth waiting for," she said softly. "I'd have waited much longer," Ryan replied, tucking a curl behind her ear with gentle fingers. "Some things shouldn't be rushed." By their 10th date, Jasmine found herself thinking less and less about Andrew. The sharp pain of his rejection had dulled to an occasional twinge, overshadowed by the blossoming connection with Ryan. Their relationship progressed with a natural ease that contrasted sharply with the emotional turbulence she'd experienced. With Andrew, Ryan brought her flowers, not as grand gestures, but as small, thoughtful surprises. wild daisies spotted on his way to meet her, a single perfect rose when she'd mentioned having a difficult day. He texted good morning and good night, not out of obligation, but from genuine desire to connect. When he spoke of his feelings, it was without drama or hesitation, just simple, honest expressions that required no decoding. "You seem happy," Sophia observed one evening over wine at Jasmine's apartment. And not just putting on a brave face, happy, actually happy. Jasmine considered the observation. "I am," she realized with mild surprise. "Ryan is uncomplicated, in the best possible way. Uncomplicated meaning he says what he feels. He doesn't play games or build walls. When he cares about something or someone, he shows it." Jasmine twirled the wine in her glass, watching the burgundy liquid catch the light. "There's no guesswork with him, no wondering where I stand or what he's thinking." Sophia studied her friend carefully. "And you? Are you falling for Dr. Dreamy?" The question gave Jasmine pause. Was she falling for Ryan? Certainly she enjoyed his company, looked forward to their time together, found herself smiling when his texts appeared on her phone. But the intense, almost painful longing she'd felt for Andrew, the connection that had seemed simultaneously inevitable and impossible, that was absent. "I'm opening to the possibility," she answered honestly. "Ryan deserves someone who's fully present, not someone still carrying someone else's baggage." "Does he know about Andrew?" Jasmine shook her head. "There's nothing to tell. It was a professional relationship that never became anything more." Sophia's raised eyebrow expressed her skepticism, but she didn't press the issue. 2 months into dating Ryan, Jasmine felt increasingly secure in their relationship. He'd introduced her to his colleagues at the hospital, to his sister who visited from Chicago, even to his elderly neighbor whom he checked on regularly. Each introduction was made with obvious pride, his arm often around her waist, his affection clear for anyone to see. "I've never dated someone who's so comfortable with public displays of affection," Jasmine commented one evening as they strolled hand in hand through a street festival in Brooklyn. Ryan squeezed her fingers. "Is it too much?" "No," she assured him, realizing how much she valued his openness. "It's wonderful, actually, refreshing." "Good," he replied, pulling her closer to kiss her temple. "Because I happen to think you're pretty wonderful, and I don't mind if the whole world knows it." The contrast with Andrew's calculated distance couldn't have been more stark, where Andrew had kept her firmly compartmentalized, a secret indulgence, to be enjoyed in private but never acknowledged publicly. Ryan seemed proud to be with her. Where Andrew had scoffed at emotional connection, Ryan nurtured it daily through small gestures of thoughtfulness and care. One particularly meaningful evening, Ryan took her to the rooftop garden of his hospital, a peaceful oasis created for patients and their families to find moments of respite during difficult times. As they sat among flowering plants and soft lights, the Manhattan skyline glittering before them, he shared stories of children who had found hope in this space. "Sometimes healing happens in unexpected places," he said, his voice gentle in the evening air. "Not just in operating rooms or with medicine, but in moments of beauty, of connection." Jasmine leaned against him, comforted by his steady presence. "That's what I try to create with my designs. Not just beautiful spaces, but environments that nurture the soul." Ryan turned to face her, his expression serious yet tender. "That's what I love about you, Jasmine. You understand that life happens in the spaces between words, between moments, between heartbeats. The word love hung in the air between them, deliberate and unretracted." Jasmine's heart quickened, not with the desperate longing she'd felt for Andrew, but with a gentle warmth that spread slowly through her chest. Late one night, after an evening at the Symphony followed by dinner at an intimate Italian restaurant, Ryan traced gentle patterns on Jasmine's palm, as they sat in. "A taxi heading back to her apartment. Stay over?" she asked, the invitation carrying deeper meaning than just tonight. Ryan's eyes met hers in the dim light of the cab, understanding the significance of the moment. "Are you sure?" Jasmine nodded, certain in a way she hadn't expected to feel again so soon. "I'm sure." That night, in the quiet sanctuary of her bedroom, Ryan's touch was reverent and unhurried. Each kiss, each caress conveyed not just desire, but genuine affection. His hands mapped her body with gentle exploration, his lips followed with whispered words of appreciation and wonder. When they finally came together, it wasn't with the desperate passion she had once imagined with Andrew, but with a connected tenderness that felt like healing. Afterward, he held her close, his heartbeat steady against her back, his arms protective. Around her waist. "Jasmine," he murmured sleepily, "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words should have thrilled her. Instead, they brought a complicated mix of emotions, gratitude, tenderness, a genuine desire to reciprocate. But as Jasmine lay awake long after Ryan had fallen asleep, she confronted an uncomfortable truth. Despite everything perfect about Ryan, despite his kindness and openness, and the uncomplicated happiness he offered, some stubborn corner of her heart still held onto the memory of dark eyes that had seen too deeply, of rare smiles that felt like hard-won treasures, of a connection that had felt both impossible and inevitable. "Let him go," she whispered to herself in the darkness, a command rather than a plea. "Choose happiness. Choose someone who chooses you." The following morning, watching Ryan prepare coffee in her kitchen, comfortable in her space, humming softly, to himself, pausing to kiss her forehead when she joined him, Jasmine made a decision. She would commit fully to this relationship, to this man who offered his heart so freely. She would stop comparing, stop wondering what might have been with Andrew, stop holding part of herself in reserve. Ryan deserved nothing less than her whole heart. And Jasmine deserved the joy of loving someone who wasn't afraid to love her back. What she didn't anticipate was how soon that resolve would be tested, or how unprepared she was for the sight of Andrew Pinto. After nearly 4 months of silence, standing in the same room with the man who was helping her forget him. Chapter 8. The Gala. The annual Children's Hospital Benefit Gala was the highlight of Manhattan's spring charity season, drawing the city's wealthiest and most influential citizens together for an evening of philanthropy disguised as glamour. Under ordinary circumstances, Jasmine would have declined the invitation. Such events were typically filled with potential clients, but the networking required more energy than she usually cared to expend on a Saturday evening. This year, however, was different, as the +1 of Dr. Ryan Steele, whose pediatric surgical innovation program was being honored. Jasmine's attendance was both a professional courtesy and a meaningful show of support for the man who had become increasingly important in her life over the past 3 months. "You don't have to come if you'd rather not," Ryan had said when he first mentioned the event, his consideration evident in his expression. "These galas can be tedious, and you'd be stuck making small talk with hospital administrators and donors. All evening, I want to be there," Jasmine had assured him, touched by his thoughtfulness. "It's an important night for you. Besides," she added with a smile, "I can handle small talk with the best of them, part of the job description for designers." Now, as she put the finishing touches on her appearance, a floor-length gown of midnight blue that draped elegantly across her shoulders and cascaded to the floor in flowing layers, Jasmine felt a flutter of anticipation. Not nervousness, exactly, but a sense that this evening represented something significant in her relationship with Ryan. 3 months of dating had evolved into something deeper than she'd initially expected. Ryan's steady presence in her life had become a source of comfort and joy, His morning texts, their easy conversations, the way he listened attentively to her thoughts about design, about family, about life. There was a solidity to him that made Jasmine feel secure in a way she'd never experienced before. When the doorbell rang, precisely at the time Ryan had promised to arrive, Jasmine smiled at his punctuality, another small but meaningful way. He showed respect for her. "You look absolutely breathtaking," he said when she opened the door, his admiration evident in his eyes as he took in her appearance. Unlike many compliments Jasmine had received throughout her life, Ryan's never felt performative or calculated, just genuine appreciation expressed openly. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Dr. Steele," she replied, appreciating how the classic black tuxedo emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. With his warm brown skin against the crisp white shirt, he looked like he belonged on a magazine cover rather than in an operating room. In the limousine provided by the hospital, Ryan reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers with casual intimacy. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing how she gazed out at the passing city lights. "Not really," Jasmine assured him, though she wasn't being entirely truthful. After years of building her business in Manhattan, she'd learned to navigate social events with professional poise. What made her uneasy tonight wasn't the gala itself, but the growing awareness that Ryan's feelings for her were deepening faster than her own. He'd been saying "I love you" for weeks now, each time with such sincerity that Jasmine wished desperately she could echo the sentiment with equal conviction. She cared for him deeply, appreciated him tremendously, even desired him genuinely. But the words "love" stuck in her throat, held back by the stubborn remnant of feeling she still carried for a man who had made it clear he had no place for such emotions in his life. The Metropolitan Museum's grand entrance was transformed for the evening, with a red carpet extending down the steps and photographers capturing the arrivals of New York's elite. As Ryan helped Jasmine from the car, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, several cameras turned their way. "Dr. Steele," called one photographer, "a photo with your date." Ryan looked to Jasmine for permission, and at her nod, drew her closer for the photo. Unlike the discomfort she might have expected, Jasmine found herself relaxing into the moment, into Ryan's easy confidence and open affection. "That wasn't so bad," she murmured as they ascended the steps. Ryan chuckled. "Just wait until my mother gets hold of that picture. She's been not so subtly asking for photos of the wonderful woman I keep talking about." The casual mention of his mother, of family, of a future where such connections mattered, sent a pleasant warmth through Jasmine's chest. This was what normal, healthy relationships looked like. No hidden agendas, no emotional walls, just two people building something meaningful together. Inside, the museum's grand hall had been transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and flowers. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegant table settings, while string musicians played softly from a corner. Hundreds of New York's wealthiest and most influential citizens mingled, their conversations creating a gentle hum beneath the music. As Ryan guided her through the crowd, stopping frequently to introduce her to colleagues and hospital donors, Jasmine found herself genuinely enjoying the evening. Unlike many charity events she'd attended professionally, where her status as a service provider sometimes led to dismissive treatment, tonight she was received as Ryan's partner, respected by association with a man clearly held in high esteem by his peers. Dr. Steele's revolutionary approach to pediatric trauma has saved countless lives, explained the hospital's chief of surgery to Jasmine during one introduction. "We're incredibly fortunate to have him on our team." Ryan accepted the praise with characteristic humility, but Jasmine didn't miss the way his hand tightened slightly on hers, gratitude for her presence, for her witnessing this recognition of his work. "I could say the same about having him in my life," Jasmine replied with genuine warmth, earning a surprised but pleased glance from Ryan. As the evening progressed, Jasmine found herself increasingly comfortable in this role, not just Ryan's, and date, but his partner. She listened attentively as he described his foundation's work to potential donors, added thoughtful observations to discussions about healthcare accessibility, and maintained genuine interest throughout conversations that might have otherwise taxed her patience. During dinner, seated at a table with several of Ryan's colleagues and their spouses, Jasmine felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in professional settings before. These were people who valued substance over status, who spoke of their work with genuine passion rather than calculated networking. When Ryan proudly described Jasmine's design achievements, the respect in his voice made her sit a little straighter, smile a little more freely. "You two make a striking couple," commented an older surgeon's wife during dessert. "How long have you been together?" 3 months, Ryan answered, his thumb absently caressing Jasmine's hand on the table, a gesture so natural it seemed he wasn't even aware he was doing it. "Only 3 months?" the woman replied with raised eyebrows. "I would have guessed much longer. You seem so comfortable together." Jasmine smiled, acknowledging the truth in the observation. There was an ease between them that defied the relatively short duration of their relationship, a compatibility that made everything simpler, smoother, more enjoyable than she'd experienced before. As dinner concluded and the formal program began, Jasmine watched with pride as Ryan was called to the stage to receive recognition for his pediatric trauma program. His acceptance speech was brief but powerful, focusing not on his own achievements but on the children whose lives had been changed, the families who had been given second chances. When he spoke of hope and healing, his gaze found Jasmine in the crowd, and the depth of emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "This is a man who loves completely," she thought, the realization both beautiful and intimidating. Following the ceremony, as the evening transitioned to dancing and more relaxed socializing, Ryan pulled Jasmine onto the dance floor. The orchestra played a slow, romantic melody, and Ryan's arms encircled her waist with gentle confidence. "Thank you for being here tonight," he murmured close to her ear. "Having you here means everything to me." Jasmine rested her head against his shoulder, allowing herself to simply be present in the moment, to appreciate this good man who had chosen her, who showed his feelings without fear or calculation, who had already begun to heal the wounds left by Andrew's rejection. "There's nowhere I'd rather be," she replied honestly. As they swayed to the music, Jasmine felt a peculiar sensation, a prickling awareness, as if she were being watched. Glancing over Ryan's shoulder, her gaze swept across the room, past elegant couples and conversing groups, until it locked with a pair of dark, intense eyes that she would have recognized anywhere. Andrew Pinto stood at the edge of the ballroom, a champagne flute gripped too tightly in his hand, his attention fixed entirely on her. Even from a distance, Jasmine could read the tension in his posture, the unfamiliar emotion that transformed his usually controlled features into something raw and exposed. Her step faltered briefly, causing Ryan to look down with concern. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Jasmine assured him quickly, forcing her attention back to her date. "Just caught my heel for a second." But as they continued to dance, Jasmine couldn't help stealing another glance in Andrew's direction. He hadn't moved, hadn't shifted his gaze. Something in his expression, a kind of stunned disbelief mixed with what almost looked like pain, made her stomach tighten with complicated emotions she'd thought were finally fading. What right did he have to look at her that way, after all this time? After his cruel dismissal, his clear message that she wasn't worth the risk of genuine emotion, after she'd finally begun to move forward. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" she asked Ryan when the dance ended. "I need to visit the ladies' room." "Of course." He brushed a gentle kiss against her temple. "I'll get us some champagne in the meantime." As Jasmine made her way across the ballroom, she deliberately chose a path that would not take her near Andrew. She needed a moment to compose herself, to quell the unwelcome surge of feelings his unexpected presence had triggered. In the elegant marble restroom, Jasmine stood before the mirror, taking deep breaths to steady herself. The woman who gazed back at her looked poised and beautiful in her midnight blue gown, but her eyes revealed the turmoil beneath. "He doesn't get to do this," she whispered to her reflection. "He doesn't get to look at me like that now." After touching up her lipstick and straightening her shoulders, Jasmine exited the restroom with renewed determination to enjoy the evening with Ryan, to focus on the man who had actually chosen to be with her, not the one who had pushed her away. But as she stepped into the hallway, intending to return to the ballroom, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Jasmine." She turned slowly, knowing exactly who she would find. Andrew stood several paces away, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain, his usual commanding presence somehow diminished. "Mr. Pinto," she replied coolly, deliberately using his formal title. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm on the hospital board," he said, his voice strangely rough. "I attend every year." An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and lingering hurt. Jasmine was determined not to be the one to break it. Let him fumble for once. Let him feel the discomfort of inadequate words. "You look," Andrew began, then seemed to struggle for the right expression. "Happy." The simple observation, delivered with what sounded almost like pain, caught Jasmine off guard. She had prepared for coldness, for indifference, even for anger, but "Not for this raw vulnerability, I am," she confirmed softly. Finally, Andrew's eyes held hers, searching for something she couldn't identify. "He seems like a good man." "He is," Jasmine replied, unable to keep a hint of challenge from her voice. "He knows what he wants, and he isn't afraid to show it." A muscle tightened in Andrew's jaw, the only visible sign of emotion in his otherwise controlled expression. "I'm glad," he said, though his eyes conveyed something entirely different. "You deserve that." Before Jasmine could respond, Ryan appeared at the end of the hallway, 2 champagne glasses in hand. His warm smile as he spotted her sent a wave of guilt through Jasmine. Guilt for the complicated emotions Andrew's presence had stirred. Guilt for the conversation they were having in this secluded hallway. "There you are," Ryan called, approaching, with easy confidence. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd gotten lost." As he reached her side, Jasmine saw the moment Ryan registered Andrew's presence. The slight narrowing of his eyes, the subtle straightening of his posture. Not jealousy, exactly, but a heightened awareness. "Ryan," Jasmine said, her voice deliberately steady, "this is Andrew Pinto. He was a client of mine earlier this year. Mr. Pinto, this is Dr. Ryan Steele." The 2 men exchanged handshakes, sizing each other up with the instinctive assessment of rivals, though Ryan had no way of knowing the complicated history that hung in the air between Jasmine and Andrew. "Congratulations on your award tonight," Andrew said with perfect politeness, though his eyes briefly flickered to where Ryan's free hand had naturally found Jasmine's waist. "Your work in pediatric trauma sounds impressive." "Thank you," Ryan replied with equal civility. "I understand you're on the hospital board. Your support makes our work possible." The exchange was flawless in its professional courtesy, but Jasmine could feel the undercurrent of tension, could see it in the tightness around Andrew's eyes, the slight protective shift of Ryan's stance. "We should get back," Jasmine suggested. To Ryan, eager to escape the awkward triangle, "I believe they're announcing the silent auction winners soon." Ryan nodded, handing her one of the champagne glasses. "It was nice meeting you, Mr. Pinto," he said with genuine courtesy. "Likewise, Dr. Steele." Andrew's gaze shifted to Jasmine, something fierce and unreadable flashing in his eyes. "Ms. Miller, it was good to see you again." as Ryan guided her back toward the ballroom, his hand warm against the small of her back. Jasmine forced herself not to look over her shoulder, not to see if Andrew was watching them walk away. Instead, she leaned slightly into Ryan's solid presence, grateful for the uncomplicated comfort he provided. What she couldn't know was that Andrew remained motionless in the hallway long after they disappeared, his composed expression finally crumbling into one of raw, undisguised loss. Chapter 9, Confrontation. The encounter with Andrew at the gala haunted Jasmine for days afterward. She had worked so hard to move forward, to build something meaningful with Ryan, yet one brief exchange in a dimly lit hallway had resurrected feelings she thought she'd successfully buried. What troubled her most was not the lingering attraction. That was understandable, given their complicated history, but the unmistakable pain she glimpsed in Andrew's eyes. The Andrew Pinto she knew was a master of concealment, his emotions carefully controlled behind an impenetrable facade. Yet that night, watching her with Ryan, his mask had slipped to reveal something raw and wounded. Every night since the gala, Jasmine found herself reliving that moment. The quiet intensity of Andrew's gaze, the slight tremor in his usually steady voice, the way he'd looked at her as if seeing something precious slipping through his fingers. During the day, she could push these thoughts aside, focusing on client meetings and design projects with fierce concentration. But in the quiet hours of darkness, they returned with unsettling persistence. "You're distracted," Ryan observed softly one evening, a week after the gala. They were having dinner at his apartment, a space Jasmine had helped redecorate over the past months. The soft lighting she'd selected cast a warm glow over the room, creating an atmosphere of intimacy and comfort that now felt strangely at odds with her inner turmoil. Jasmine set down her wineglass, guilt washing over her. Ryan deserved better than divided attention. "Just work stress," she lied, hating herself for the deception. "A challenging new client." Ryan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "You know you can talk to me about anything," he said, his eyes reflecting nothing but sincerity. "Even if it's not about work." The genuine compassion in his voice only intensified Jasmine's shame. Here was a man who offered his whole heart without reservation, while she guarded pieces of herself, pieces still tangled up with Andrew. "I know," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Thank you." Later that night, unable to sleep beside Ryan's peaceful form, Jasmine slipped out to his balcony. The cool night air caressed her skin as she gazed out at the Manhattan skyline, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. In the distance, she could make out the distinctive silhouette of the Pinto Tower, its illuminated spire reaching toward the heavens like a beacon or a reminder of what she'd left behind. Wrapping her arms around herself, Jasmine closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember moments she'd been trying to forget. Andrew's rare smile when she'd challenged his design preferences, the intensity in his gaze when their hands had accidentally touched, the vulnerability he'd shown during their conversation in the rainstorm. Each memory carried an echo of connection that she couldn't deny, despite his ultimate rejection. Her phone vibrated on the small table beside her, startling her from her thoughts. Who would be texting at 2 a.m.? With an inexplicable flutter of anticipation, she reached for it. "Andrew, are you awake?" The simple question sent her heart racing. How had he known? And more importantly, why was he reaching out now, after months of silence? She should ignore it, delete it, block his number. Instead, her fingers moved of their own accord. Yes. 3 dots appeared immediately, indicating he was typing. Then, "I need to see you, please." Jasmine's hand trembled slightly as she stared at the screen. The rational part of her mind screamed warnings about reopening wounds, about disrespecting Ryan, about putting herself in a position to be hurt again. But another part, A part she'd been fighting for months, whispered that unfinished business demanded resolution. "It's 2 a.m., she replied, avoiding a direct answer. "I know. Tomorrow then. Coffee at Riverside Park, 10 a.m. Just to talk." Jasmine gazed back at Ryan's silhouette through the glass doors, guilt and confusion warring within her. Meeting Andrew would be a betrayal of the trust Ryan had placed in her. Yet not meeting him meant continuing this limbo, this emotional purgatory, where part of her remained tied to a man who had rejected everything she offered. "1 hour," she typed finally. "That's all." "Thank you," came his immediate response. "I'll be waiting by the 79th Street entrance." Sleep eluded Jasmine for the remainder of the night. She lay beside Ryan, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the peaceful expression on his face. He deserved someone who loved him without reservation, without comparison, without the shadow of another man haunting her thoughts. Was she capable of being that person? Until the gala, she'd believed. So, now she wasn't sure. By morning, dark circles shadowed her eyes, earning concerned glances from Ryan as he prepared for his hospital shift. "Are you sure you're feeling all right?" he asked, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "You look exhausted." "Just didn't sleep well," Jasmine replied, the half-truth bitter on her tongue. "I might take a personal day." Ryan nodded, his trust in her so complete it was painful. "Get some rest. I'll call you between surgeries." After he left, Jasmine sat motionless on the edge of the bed, phone clutched in her hand. She should cancel. Send a message to Andrew explaining that whatever he wanted to discuss was better left unsaid. Instead, at 9:45, she found herself walking toward Riverside Park, heart pounding with each step, uncertainty and anticipation churning in equal measure. The spring morning was crisp and clear, cherry blossoms scattering pale pink petals along the pathways. Families strolled, joggers passed, the world continuing its ordinary rhythms, while Jasmine felt suspended between past and present, between what had been and what could be. Andrew was already waiting when she arrived, his tall figure instantly recognizable even from a distance. He stood with his back to the river, hands thrust into the pockets of casual slacks, an unusual departure from his typical business attire. As she approached, Jasmine noted other changes, slight shadows beneath his eyes, a certain tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Most striking was the vulnerability in his expression as he caught sight of her. No attempt to mask his emotions behind his usual composed exterior. "You came," he said when she reached him, relief evident in his voice. "I said I would," Jasmine replied carefully, maintaining a deliberate distance between them. "What's this about, Andrew?" Rather than answering immediately, he gestured toward a nearby bench with a river view. "Can we sit?" Once seated, Andrew seemed to struggle for words, another departure from his usual confident demeanor. Jasmine waited, refusing to make this easier for him. The silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the park, children's laughter, birds calling, the distant hum of the city. "I've been thinking about you," he finally said, his gaze fixed on the Hudson rather than on her. "Every day since you walked away." The admission hung in the air between them, weighty with implication. Jasmine remained silent, sensing he had more to say. "I told myself it was better this way," Andrew continued after a moment. "That I was protecting both of us from inevitable disappointment. That my life had no room for the kind of relationship you wanted." His hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I convinced myself I was being honest, not cowardly." "And now?" Jasmine asked, her voice controlled despite the emotions roiling within her. Andrew finally turned to face her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "Now I understand what a lie that was. Seeing you with him at the gala," his voice roughened, "seeing you happy, radiant, cherished in all the ways I refused to cherish you, it broke something in me, Jasmine. Something I didn't know could break." A breeze lifted a strand of hair across Jasmine's face. Before she could react, Andrew's hand moved instinctively to brush it away, then froze mid-air, as if remembering he no longer had the right to such intimacies. He lowered his hand slowly, the aborted gesture somehow more poignant than if he'd completed it. Jasmine's heart pounded painfully against her ribs. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I was wrong," he said simply, the admission clearly costing him. "About everything. I told myself I didn't care, that I didn't need emotional connection. But the truth is I was terrified of it." His eyes held hers, vulnerability naked in their depths. "Terrified of how much I already cared about you." Jasmine stood abruptly, needing physical distance from the impact of his words. She walked a few steps toward the river, gathering her composure as she watched sunlight dance across the water's surface. "You can't do this, Andrew," she said finally, turning back to face him. "You can't just decide you made a mistake and expect me to—" "What? Leave Ryan? Run back to you? After you humiliated me, rejected me, made me feel like I was asking for too much by wanting basic emotional honesty?" Andrew rose as well, but didn't approach her. "I'm not expecting anything," he said quietly. "I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least tell you the truth." "Which is what exactly?" Jasmine challenged, anger finally breaking through her careful composure. "That I love you," Andrew said, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "That I loved you even when I was pushing you away. That watching you with someone else is unbearable, not because of jealousy or possessiveness, but because every time he touches you, every time he makes you smile, I'm reminded of all the ways I failed to do the same when I had the chance." The declaration hit Jasmine with physical force. She had imagined hearing those words from him countless times during their months together, had ached for them, longed for them, eventually given up hope of ever hearing them. Now, when she should be indifferent to them, they threatened to unravel everything she'd built since walking away. "Love isn't a word you get to use after the fact," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Love is daily actions, consistent presence, vulnerability when it's difficult, not just when it's convenient." "You're right," Andrew acknowledged, taking a tentative step toward her. "I didn't understand that before. I thought love was a weakness, something to guard against, to control." His eyes searched hers. "My father taught me that after my mother died, showed me through his grief what happens when you let someone matter too much." Jasmine wrapped her arms around herself, a futile barrier against the impact of his confession. "Why should I believe you now? How do I know this isn't just you wanting something you can't have?" Andrew stepped closer, still maintaining a respectful distance. "Because I'm different now. Those months without you, they forced me to confront truths about myself I've been avoiding my entire life. About why I keep people at a distance. About what I'm really afraid of." "And what's that?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not failure," Andrew replied. "Not rejection, but loving someone so completely that losing them would destroy me." His voice broke slightly. "Like losing my mother destroyed my father." The revelation struck Jasmine like a physical blow. She remembered their conversation during the rainstorm, his rare mention of his parents. Suddenly, his emotional walls made a terrible kind of sense. Not just professional armor, but protection against devastating loss. "When my mother died," Andrew continued, his voice thick with emotion, "my father changed overnight. The man who used to laugh, who used to lift me onto his shoulders and point out constellations, he disappeared. In his place was someone hollow, someone who poured himself into work because facing the emptiness at home was unbearable." He looked away, blinking rapidly. "I learned that lesson well, Jasmine. Too well, Andrew." She began, uncertain what she even wanted to say, moved by his honesty despite her determination to remain aloof. I'm in therapy, he interrupted, offering the information like a gift. Twice a week since you left, learning to recognize patterns, to understand why I push away the people who matter most. A self-deprecating smile touched his lips. My therapist says I'm her most analytical patient, always trying to solve emotions like business problems. Despite everything, Jasmine felt a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. That sounds like you. A cherry blossom petal drifted down, landing on Andrew's shoulder. Jasmine resisted the urge to brush it away, to create an excuse for contact. After you left, Andrew said softly, I tried to go back to my life before you, threw myself into work, convinced myself I was better off without complications, but everything felt, he searched for the right word, hollow. The penthouse you designed, it was perfect, exactly what I'd asked for, but without you there, it felt like a showroom, not a home. The admission touched something tender in Jasmine's heart. She remembered how much of herself she'd poured into that design, how she'd tried to create a space that could nurture the man she glimpsed beneath Andrew's armor. I kept going back to that night in the rain, Andrew continued, when you listened without judgment as I talked about my mother. No one had ever seen me like that, Jasmine. Seen past the CEO, past the wealth, to the broken parts I've spent. A lifetime hiding. His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. No one had ever made me want to be seen. A pair of joggers passed by, their laughter momentarily intruding on the intimate bubble of conversation. Jasmine waited until they were gone. Before responding, I saw you because that's who I am, she said finally. I see potential in spaces, in people. It doesn't mean that you still feel anything for me, Andrew finished when she trailed off. I understand. I know you're with him now. I can see he makes you happy, gives you what I couldn't. I'm not asking you to leave him. He paused, gathering himself, but I needed you to know that I was wrong, about what I wanted, about what I felt for you, and most of all, about what I was capable of giving. Jasmine stood motionless, torn between conflicting emotions. Part of her, the wounded part, wanted to walk away, to leave Andrew with the same uncertainty and pain he'd inflicted on her. Another part recognized the courage it had taken for him to come here, to speak these truths, to make himself vulnerable without expectation of reward. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. You don't have to say anything, Andrew assured her. I didn't come here expecting forgiveness or a second chance. He took a deep breath. I just wanted to be honest with you, finally. To tell you that you were right about me, about what I was feeling, about what I was afraid of. The sunlight caught in his dark eyes, revealing flecks of amber she'd never noticed before. Those eyes that had once been so guarded, so carefully controlled, now looked at her with naked longing and something else, a peace that came from truth finally spoken. They stood in silence for a long moment, the river flowing steadily beside. Them, pedestrians passing by, unaware of the emotional currents swirling between the two figures on the pathway. I should go, Jasmine said at last, feeling suddenly exhausted by the weight of unresolved feelings. Andrew nodded, accepting her withdrawal without protest. Thank you for coming, for listening. As Jasmine turned to leave, his voice stopped her one last time. Jasmine, he said softly, I will spend every single day proving that I can love you the way you begged me to, the way you always deserved, not in private, not halfway, but fully, passionately, fearlessly. His eyes held hers. Even if you never choose me again. The promise hung in the air between them, sincere and undemanding. Jasmine felt tears threatening, confusion and longing tangling in her chest. How, she asked, the question escaping before she could reconsider. How would you love me differently? Andrew's expression softened, hope flickering briefly in his eyes at her unexpected question. I would start by never hiding what you mean. To me, he said. No more compartmentalizing, no more walls between personal and professional. I would introduce you to everyone in my life as the extraordinary woman who taught me what matters. He took a step closer, emboldened by her continued presence. I would listen, really listen, when you speak, not just to your words, but to what lies beneath them. I would show up when I say I will. I would let you see me, all of me, not just the parts I've deemed acceptable. The morning sun illuminated his face, highlighting the earnestness of his expression. I would hold your hand in public without hesitation. I would make time for you, not just give you whatever is left after work. I would tell you every day that I love you, not because the words are easy, but because they're true. His voice dropped, becoming intimate despite the public setting. And I would touch you like you're precious, because you are. I would memorize every curve, every freckle, every sigh. I would learn what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, what makes you feel cherished. Jasmine's breath caught at the unexpected poetry from a man who had once been so emotionally stunted. Andrew, most of all, he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, I would match your courage with my own. The courage you showed when you walked into my office that first day and saw beyond my walls. The courage you showed when you told me how you felt, even knowing I might reject you. His voice thickened. The courage you showed when you walked away rather than accept less than you deserved. A tear slipped down Jasmine's cheek before she could stop it. Andrew's hand lifted instinctively, then hesitated, silently asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he gently brushed the tear from her skin, his touch fleeting but electric. "Goodbye, Andrew," she managed, before walking away with measured steps that belied her inner turmoil. Behind her, Andrew remained on the path, watching her retreating figure until she disappeared from view, patient in a way he had never been before, determined in a way she had never witnessed, and loving her with a clarity that had come far too late. Or perhaps a small voice whispered in Jasmine's mind as she hailed a taxi, not too late at all. Chapter 10. Hearts Unveiled. For 7 days following her meeting with Andrew, Jasmine moved through life in a fog of conflicted emotions. By day, she focused on her design projects with deliberate intensity, losing herself in color palettes and fabric selections that required no emotional investment. By night, she lay awake beside Ryan, guilt and confusion keeping sleep at bay. Ryan, perceptive as always, noticed the change in her. "Something's bothering you," he said one evening as they prepared dinner together in his kitchen. It wasn't a question, but a gentle observation. Jasmine nearly dropped the knife she was using to chop vegetables. "What makes you say that?" Ryan's kind eyes studied her face. "You've been distant, preoccupied, and you haven't been sleeping well." He set down the wooden spoon he'd been using to stir sauce. "I'm a doctor, Jasmine. I notice these things." The concern in his voice made her shame deepen. Ryan deserved honesty. He deserved someone whose heart wasn't divided. "I saw Andrew Pinto last week," she admitted, setting down her knife. "My former client." Ryan nodded slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. "The man from the gala?" "Yes." Jasmine took a steadying breath. "There's something I haven't told you about him." With halting words, Jasmine explained her history with Andrew, the connection that had developed during their professional relationship, his rejection when she expressed her feelings, her decision to walk away. She told him about their recent meeting and Andrew's confession, knowing Ryan deserved the complete truth. When she finished, Ryan was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. "I suspected there was more to it than a professional relationship," he finally said. "The way he looked at you at the gala, that wasn't how someone looks at a former designer." Jasmine wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Ryan moved closer, gently taking her hands in his. Jasmine, we all have past relationships, some resolved, some not quite finished. That's part of being human. His thumb traced soothing patterns on her skin. The question is, where? Do your feelings stand now? The directness of the question caught her off guard. She'd expected anger, hurt, perhaps even accusations, not this calm invitation to examine her own heart. I thought I'd moved past him, she admitted, unable to meet Ryan's eyes. Being with you has been wonderful, uncomplicated. You're everything he wasn't. Open, honest, unafraid of emotion. But, Ryan prompted gently when she hesitated. Jasmine finally looked up, finding only compassion in his gaze. But seeing him again stirred up feelings I thought were gone, and I don't know what to do with that. Ryan's hands tightened briefly, around hers before releasing them. He moved to the window, looking out at the city lights as he gathered his thoughts. I love you, Jasmine, he said simply, turning back to face her. That hasn't been a secret, but love isn't about possession. It's about wanting the best for someone, even when that might not include you. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes at the generosity of his response. Ryan, he shook his head. Let me finish. These past months with you have been incredible. You're extraordinary, brilliant, passionate, kind. Any man would be privileged to be with you. A sad smile touched his lips, including the one who was foolish enough to let you go in the first place. What are you saying? Jasmine asked, throat tight with emotion. Ryan approached her again, cupping her face gently between his hands. I'm saying that I deserve someone whose heart is fully available, and you deserve to be with whoever your heart truly wants, without guilt, without doubt. It's not that simple, Jasmine protested, even as she recognized the truth in his words. Matters of the heart rarely are, Ryan agreed. But pretending confusion isn't there doesn't make it disappear. His thumbs wiped away tears that had begun to fall down her cheeks. You need time, Jasmine. Space to figure out what and who you really want. I don't want to hurt you, she whispered, the irony of echoing Andrew's words not lost on her. Sometimes pain is unavoidable, Ryan replied, with a gentle wisdom that reminded her why she'd been drawn to him in the first place. But dishonesty hurts more in the long run. That night, they slept in separate rooms. Ryan's decision offered with such compassion that it only increased Jasmine's admiration for him. In the morning, as she prepared to leave, he kissed her forehead with heartbreaking tenderness. Take the time you need, he said. I'll be here if you decide I'm the one you want, and if not, he managed a smile, though sadness lingered in his eyes. Then I'll be grateful for the time we had. The selflessness of his love humbled her. As Jasmine left his apartment, she couldn't help wondering if she deserved either of the men in her life, the one who had learned to love too late, or the one whose capacity for love had never been in question. For the next 2 weeks, Jasmine lived in emotional solitude. She took no calls from either man, immersing herself in work and the difficult process of honest self-examination. What did she truly want? Security and openness with Ryan, or the complicated, intense connection she shared with Andrew, now that he claimed to have changed? The answer came to her not in a moment of dramatic revelation, but in a quiet evening, as she sat on her Brooklyn balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. She'd been leafing through her portfolio, reviewing past projects, when she came across her designs for Andrew's penthouse, the space she had crafted specifically for him, incorporating elements that spoke to the man she had glimpsed beneath his armor. Looking at those designs now, Jasmine recognized that she hadn't just been creating a space for Andrew. She had been creating a visual representation of her understanding of him, of his complexity, his hidden depths, his potential, for warmth beneath the cool exterior. No other client had ever inspired such insight, such intuitive connection. With Ryan, everything was clear and straightforward, his feelings, his intentions, his desires. With Andrew, she had always sensed layers and complexities, shadows and light, challenges and rewards. The ease of being with Ryan was a gift. The challenge of truly knowing Andrew was a different kind of treasure. In that moment of clarity, Jasmine understood her choice wasn't between easy happiness and difficult love. It was between a connection that was comfortable but incomplete, and one that challenged her to grow, to understand, to see beneath surfaces, just as she did in her design work. The next morning, Jasmine called Ryan first. He deserved that courtesy. Their conversation was brief but emotional, his acceptance of her decision tempered with genuine sadness. "He's a fortunate man," Ryan said finally. "I hope he realizes that this time." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, knowing the words were inadequate, for the grace he had shown her. For everything. After ending the call, Jasmine sat in silence for several minutes, honoring the relationship that might have been. Then she reached for her phone again and typed a simple message to Andrew. "Meet me at the penthouse, 7 p.m. His response came almost immediately. "I'll be there." The penthouse was exactly as she had designed it, her vision for Andrew's life brought to physical form. As Jasmine waited, she moved through the space, remembering the conversations that had taken place in each room, the moments of connection, the glimpses of vulnerability that had drawn her to this complicated man. When the elevator announced Andrew's arrival, she stood in the center of the living room, hands clasped to still their trembling. He stepped into the space, dressed casually, in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looking both familiar and somehow different, perhaps less guarded, less rigidly controlled. "Jasmine," he said, her name almost a prayer on his lips. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, maintaining distance between them. "About being afraid of loving someone completely." Andrew nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I understand fear," Jasmine said. "After you rejected me, I was terrified of ever being that vulnerable again. Ryan was—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Safe, uncomplicated. He offered his heart freely, without conditions or walls." Something like resignation passed across Andrew's features. "He sounds like a good man." "He is," Jasmine confirmed, "one of the best I've ever known." Andrew's posture stiffened slightly, as if bracing for a blow. "I understand." "No," Jasmine countered, taking a step toward him. "I don't think you do." She drew a deep breath. "I ended things with Ryan this morning." Hope flickered in Andrew's eyes, quickly tempered with caution. "Why?" "Because my heart was never fully his to claim," Jasmine admitted. "Even when I thought I was moving on, even when I was building something new with him, part of me was still back here, still with you." Andrew remained motionless, as if afraid any movement might shatter this moment. "Jasmine, I meant what I said. I'll spend every day proving—" "I don't want proof," she interrupted, closing more of the distance between them. "I want partnership, equality. I want you to be as brave in loving me as I was in loving you." "I want that too," Andrew said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm not the same man who pushed you away, Jasmine. These months without you," he shook his head slightly, "they changed me. Or maybe they just forced me to acknowledge what was already changing from the moment you walked into my office and saw past every wall I'd built." Jasmine stood before him now, close enough to see the vulnerability in his eyes, the slight tremor in his usually steady hands. "I need you to understand something, Andrew. I'm not giving you a second chance because I need you or can't live without you. I'm choosing you because I believe in who we could be together, if you're brave enough to love without restraint." "I am," he promised, reaching for her hands, but stopping just short of touching her, still allowing her to set the boundaries. I will be, every day. Jasmine bridged the final distance between them, taking his hands in hers. Then show me, she whispered, not with words this time. Show me. For a heartbeat, Andrew stood perfectly still, his eyes searching hers. Then, with the deliberate intention of a man making a vow, he pulled her into his arms and lowered his lips to hers. Unlike their imagined first kiss, passionate, desperate, filled with unacknowledged longing, this kiss was tender, reverent, unhurried. Andrew's hands cradled her face as if she were precious beyond measure, his touch communicating what words never could: apology, gratitude, devotion. When they finally parted, Andrew rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. I love you, he said simply. I should have told you months ago. Jasmine's hands found their way to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. We have time now, she assured him. All the time we need. Not just time, Andrew corrected, drawing back to meet her gaze. A future, together. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. If that's what you want. It is, Jasmine confirmed, seeing in his eyes not just desire or momentary passion, but the steady flame of enduring love, the kind that grows stronger through challenges, the kind that transforms not just the one who receives it, but the one who gives it as well. As evening descended over Manhattan, turning windows into mirrors reflecting golden light, Jasmine and Andrew remained in each other's arms, not in the shadowed hallway of a charity gala or the stolen privacy of a rainy evening, but in the home they would now build together, both literally and figuratively. Two souls who had found in each other not just passion or companionship, but the courage to be fully seen, with all their complexities and imperfections. Two hearts unveiled at last. Not perfect, perhaps, but perfectly matched in their journey towards something rare and precious. Love without fear, commitment without reservation, and a future built on the solid foundation of truth. In that moment, surrounded by the space she had designed for him, but that would now be theirs, Jasmine knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Not the easiest choice, perhaps, but the one her heart had been leading her toward all along. Through pain and joy, through doubt and clarity, through the winding path that had finally brought her home.